Okay, we're 1 minute to go. I'm going to give it a little bit more, just another minute before we kick off, but you'll see on your screen a thought experiment, so please give it a go. We'll be looking forward to hearing your thoughts later on, so it's all part of the meeting. So I'm just going to check on participants and see how we're going for numbers.
Morning, Cash. Good to see you again. We seen you yesterday at OSIG.
Morning.
Hi, Chris. Welcome.
Morning.
Morning, Chris.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, but I'm just going to give it a minute to make sure that we've not left anyone out who wants to join. I'm usually always a minute or two late, unfortunately, so I'm making sure that we don't kick off without missing anyone out. We are recording this meeting today, just to let you know. And there's a couple more just coming into the waiting room now. Okay, well, I think I'm going to kick off now. It's 1 minute past 10. I don't want to use up, keep you waiting when we've got so much content to get through. So first of all, thank you very much for joining us today. It's the IFR for MPO UK Country Awareness Meeting. I'm Roberta Fusco from CFG and Director of Policy and Communications, and really pleased to welcome you all here today. We're here for about 2 hours. We may be a little bit less, we'll see. There's time for questions as we go along, and there's also the structure, there's also time in the middle of presentations for some breakout rooms to share your views and thoughts. So please join in as much as you can. So we're here, it is Friday the 13th. It is 2020, so I'm just going to put that out there. I'm going to put it out. Who knows what's going to happen? Fingers crossed that everything goes okay. Bear with us. We have Sam, who's a project director, joining us from Uganda, and Sam's been amazing in keeping this all together. But we do have a couple of speakers, and so there's always possibility for things to go wrong. So bear with us. We'll do our best. But essentially, let's kick off for the meeting proper. We are recording, just to let you know, and we will send out a recording subsequently. So don't worry if you miss anything or if you want to share it with your colleagues. CFG is proud to be the UK country champion for this project. We're so happy that it's got off the ground and that we're part of it. We encourage you all to participate, to get involved. This is your opportunity, as you know already, it's the opportunity to really shape the future of not-for-profit financial reporting, not just in the UK, but of course globally. If we could move on to the next slide, please, Tim, that would be great. Thank you. Also, just to say that because there's multiple presenters, we thought it'd be easier if just one person had the slides. So Tim is the director here. So yeah, it's like the number 10 press briefings. Next slide, please. So there we go. But so we're here today to go through the, oh, sorry, have I missed a slide? I think I've missed a slide. I'm so sorry. I didn't introduce the speakers. I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep. Tim, would you mind going back one? I'm so sorry. I'm not starting out well. I did say it was Friday the 13th, didn't I? So we will be hearing from Karen a little bit later on. Karen's not able to join us for the full session today, but Karen, as Chief Executive CFG, she'll be, she's at a SORT meeting at the moment. She will join us for the second half of the meeting. So watch out for her there. But we are very pleased and very honoured to have Pesh and Tim here today to present to us. Most of you, I think, will know Pesh. Pesh doesn't need very much introduction, but I have his bio here, which I will read out. So as you know, Pesh is Global Head of Nonprofits at Crow. He's been involved in the sector both professionally and as a volunteer for over 35 years. So what Pesh doesn't know about the sector is not worth knowing. Among his many accolades, Pesh is Special Advisor to CFG. He's the longest standing member of the UK Charity SORP Committee. He's chair of the ICAEW Charity Audit Insights Working Party. He's a member of the FRC's working group that produced the Charity Audit Practice Note. He was recently awarded Personality of the Year 2020, so a big clap to Pesh there. And of course, his most important role, I think we'll all agree, is he's a member of the PAG of the Practitioner Advisory Group for this project. We also are joined by Tim Boyes-Watson, who is Global Director of Alliances and Advocacy at Humentum, and previously CEO of Mango before the merger. Tim leads sector dialogues on financial management issues with NGOs, government and other funders, and coordinates senior finance networks, as well as delivering consultancy on strategy development, value for money, and design and capacity building projects. And you'll be hearing from both Pesh and Tim. There will be a break. Pesh will start, and then there'll be a break for breakout rooms, and then Tim will take over, going into a bit more detail about the project itself. So I think I am ready to move on now, Tim. Thank you. Thank you. So I think I've gone through the session here. So there we go. I think we can move on to the next one. So you know how to, I think we all know how to use Zoom. So we'll just move on to CFG. So for those of you who don't know CFG, we are a charity finance group. We are, our mission really is to inspire a financially confident, dynamic and trustworthy charity sector. We have over 1,400 charities in our membership, charities and corporate partners, of which Crow is obviously one. And we are a membership organisation. So if you don't know about us, please go and have a look at our website to find out more about what we do. And I can follow up with you individually later. Next slide, please, Tim. Thank you. So why is CFG the UK country champion? CFG have a long relationship with the development of international financial standards. We first held a symposium in 2012, a long time before I joined. Oops, is there a... We might have an issue with seeing the slide notes. So we held a symposium in 2012, and where we first started to discuss this idea. So it's been a long time coming, a long time in gestation, and we're delighted that Humentum and CIPFA are now leading the project to take that forward globally, on a global scale. And Sam, who joins us today from, as I said, from Uganda, she's a project director who has a massive job on her hands to corral people globally around the world in this project. A little bit about kind of the birth of this. So I think for us in the UK, we're very used to the UK charity SORP. We're used to having a standard to adhere to. We're used to being asked to be engaged as well. So in a way, we're kind of spoilt, I think. In a way, in the UK, sometimes there's an over reliance on us being involved and engaged, but that's not the case currently globally. So this is what this project is here to do. There are current international standards for business and public sectors, as you know. This project is here to really put not-for-profits on an even par with the profit and business sector. And it's part of raising the profile of not-for-profits globally. As you know, some countries have developed national guidance, and the UK charity SORP is one of those beacons of kind of best practice. However, that is based on IFRS for SMEs. I don't know if you, Tim, if you wouldn't mind kind of showing the next illustrations, that would be great. Thank you. And this project is here to, in the long term, thank you, in the long term to establish an international standard so that there is a link between all of these different standards. And who knows, at the moment, the UK, as you know, UK SORP is going through a further revision, and that's, as I said earlier, that's where Karen is at the moment. It's unfortunate that a last minute meeting was put in of the SORP committee, so Karen's there at the moment, but she will join us later. And CFG are also acting as a convener for that review as well. But who knows, perhaps next time we're updating the UK SORP, we will have an international standard that we will need to be adhering to. So by participating in this project, we really are setting, really are kind of setting the future for international and domestic guidance in our sector. So it may seem like a long way off. It may seem like, well, you know, there's the UK SORP, we need to engage with that right now, but this is where it all starts. So we're really pleased to have you with us on the journey. Next slide, please. So I think I have introduced our speakers already. I won't do that again. I think you know Pesh and Tim already, but it would be really helpful if you wouldn't mind in the chat introducing yourselves. We won't kind of go to every single person just for time, but if you wouldn't mind putting it into the chat, and then everyone else can see who's here. I just wanted to make a special mention for Chris Harris, Phil McMinn and Paul Winrow. They are all members of the professional advisory group. They're waving at the moment for this project. So when we break out into groups later on, you might be able to talk a little bit more with those individuals to find out a bit more about the project itself and how the professional advisory group works and so on. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. So all those introductions are coming into the chat. That's great. Thank you very much. And I'm recognising that many of you are also, of course, involved in the UK charity SORP revision too. So you'll be seeing me in lots of different forums. So as that's happening, I think we'll move on with the meeting if that's okay. And I am very pleased to hand over to Pesh.
Thanks, Roberta. So what we're going to do to begin with, we're going to take a few minutes, maybe 15 or 20, to introduce you to the whole IFR for the NPO project. I'm sorry for those of you, I know some of you have been on these webinars before, and you might be familiar with it, but what we're trying to do is make it a sort of a quick reminder and make sure we're all on the same page, so when we get out into the breakout groups and do things later on, we actually understand what's happening there. So we're going to start with a short video, and you can actually find that video on the project website. So if you ever want to get back to it or send anyone else to it, you can. So I think, Tim, you're going to play the video, aren't you?
IFR for NPO is a 5-year initiative to develop the first ever internationally applicable financial reporting guidance for non-profit organisations. It's coordinated by Humentum and the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. You probably know that businesses have international financial reporting standards, and governments have international public sector accounting standards. But the not-for-profit sector has no equivalent. This undermines the consistency and usefulness of financial reports, and ultimately harms the sense of trust and accountability that is so central to its effectiveness. The current system is also inefficient, with duplication of effort for both NPO and funders in meeting multiple and at times conflicting financial requirements. An academic study in 2014 received responses from 179 countries. 72% of respondents agreed that an international standard for NPOs would be useful. So, the IFR for NPO project is answering this call. By engaging a wide range of stakeholders, the new guidance will command support from the accounting community and NPOs, as well as those that fund and regulate them. The guidance is being developed in a technically rigorous 3-step process, involving a consultation phase and development of an exposure draft, with final guidance available from early 2025. With the goal that at least 10 countries will use the guidance by 2030, with more to follow. The project has a technical advisory group involving national standard setters from every continent and an official observer from the International Accounting Standards Board. And the practitioner advisory group helps us ensure the guidance will meet users' needs. The founding funders share our vision for this game-changing project. We have the opportunity of a generation. We can increase accountability and transparency while reducing inefficiency in the current system. IFR.
Thanks, Tim. So it might appear that this is a really long timeline, when you think about it. Well, I first got involved with what was then called SORP 2, not because it was a second SORP, because SORP 1 was a pension SORP. SORP 2 was something that we did in 1988. And I think in those days, SORP stood for Statement of Rare Practice rather than Statement of Recommended Practice. But then in 1992, when the Charities Act came out, and for the first time, charities were actually required by law to produce accounts, I was contacted by the Charity Commission and said, will you join a committee to help develop a new SORP, which we can use as the basis for these accounting regulations? And I said, how long for? And they said, well, for about 3 months, and we'll get this out. And that was in 1992. And 22 years later, we did SORP 2015. So I was on the committee all that time. So these things have a long timeline. They have to develop, they have to get bought into from different places. And this one particularly because, we've got so many geographies with different areas. And actually understanding that is really quite important because those geographies sometimes treat things in different ways. So the way, for example, Australia and New Zealand recognize income is quite different to the way charities in the US and the UK recognize income, and getting to some sort of consensus on that is going to be quite interesting. So I hope that that video has given you just a sense of how important this exercise is, making sure we actually have one basis that we are all using, and one basis that is actually designed for not-for-profits and not for private sector organizations, and that we've got to squeeze sort of round pegs into square holes. So the big question is, what are we talking about here? What are the type of financial reports that we're talking about? Which financial reports? So non-profit organizations produce many different types of reports. You've got internal reports, you've got reports for your donors, and then you've got what they call general purpose financial statements, which are really effectively like your statutory accounts. And that's what we're talking about. And all the transactions which are brought in go through your accounting systems, and they come out delivering one of these 3 reports, or in fact, all 3 reports at a certain time. So if you look at this, we're focusing on a particular area here. And this particular area is the general purpose financial statements, which is that little bit box that's been circled there. At the same time, of course, there are already other projects running side by side. So when we're talking about donor reports, there's a project by Humentum, which is trying to harmonize donor project reporting formats. And that's going to be crucially complementary to what we're doing here, because they should try and link up. So we shouldn't have to do something quite different for donors and quite different for statutory accounts. And hopefully even get some idea about our internal reports and our dashboards, so you don't get a sort of the situation where people say, well, we've been looking at this all through the year, and then when we come to the end of the year, we get something quite different. So that's what we're moving on with, and thinking of how we'll actually look at that. So Tim, if you want to move on. So there are many stakeholders. And when we talk about stakeholders, we talk about anyone who can be impacted by what the charity does or the not-for-profit does, or who who impacts what it does. So you've got stakeholders, which are users, preparers, and auditors. So on your users, who uses your accounts? You've got people like donors, regulators, the clients, maybe sometimes our beneficiaries, but certainly maybe the wider public. And at the moment, that differs in different geographies too, because in many geographies, there aren't any rules about who can see your accounts. And in some geographies, you don't have to publish those accounts. They may just go to a regulator and they're not put into the public domain. So actually understanding all of that is quite important. Then, of course, you've got the preparers, people like you in the room who prepare these accounts, and they may be all over the world. There may be sub-branches who are producing stuff that comes into this, etc. And then also you've got these auditors, boring people like me, who come in and check what you're doing. But these donors and regulators and the clients, we also have an important donor reference group. So making sure that the donors buy into this, because when the donors buy into this is really important, because they are the ones that will make other organizations adapt and adhere to these principles, saying, well, if you're going to get funding from us, we want you to prepare your accounts in this one format, which is universal and accepted across the group. So the IFR for NPO project doesn't represent any particular group. It doesn't represent the not-for-profit organizations. It doesn't represent the auditors or whatever else, but is keen to develop guidance that balances the costs and benefits to different stakeholders. So we're trying to make sure that we're picking up all of this at the same time. So moving on, what are we trying to deliver? There are many current problems with this, isn't it? When we talk to stakeholders, they say that there's no internationally applicable standard, and that means that this is causing a problem, particularly where countries do not have national standards. And if they don't have a national standard, this leads to inconsistency even within the same jurisdiction. For larger international NPOs, the big sort of NGOs, the Save the Children's, the Red Crosses, etc., inconsistency between countries makes consolidation difficult and expensive. When funders look at the financial statements, they may find it hard to assess the financial capability or to actually understand the wider context for a particular project. And all this results in duplication, expense, extra charges for financial reporting, due diligence, auditing, etc. And this lack of clarity and consistency ultimately reduces the transparency and therefore the trust in the sector. Because, in this global world, the trust is global trust. So if you get a lot of publicity about big problems happening with non-profit organizations in the US, then that's going to reflect on the UK and generally how people think about non-for-profits generally. So we need to guard the reputation of the sector as jealously as we guard the reputation of our own organizations. So what's the solution? The solution is this IFR for NPO. It's providing one internationally applicable standard, and it would then be up to particular countries to decide whether to adopt, adapt, or how they're going to align their guidance. So if you think about SOAPs, our UK charity SOAP, if you look at what a SOAP's, the Financial Reporting Council says SOAP is for, a SOAP is meant to provide guidance of how you apply the financial reporting standards to a particular sector. And that's because it's recognized that those financial reporting standards weren't particularly developed for that particular sector. So you might have a pension SOAP or higher education SOAP or housing SOAP. And those are all developed to make sure that the particular aspects of your sector are covered in this guidance. But in fact, if we have an international financial reporting standard for not-for-profit organizations, this will make either national reporting probably redundant, or at the least will help shape and guide what goes into the national reporting. So you won't have to interpret IFRS and take it in from private sector organizations into this, because we will have something which is tailored and designed particularly for not-for-profit organizations. So the future income and the benefits are wide-ranging. You know, you'll be able to demonstrate their capacity, attract funds, support the provision for decision-making in the same way across different geographies. And ultimately, we believe that this guidance will lead to a more resilient and accountable sector that is better able to attract, generate, and manage funds to achieve positive social good. Okay, so who's behind the project? So we've got Tim in the room. Tim has been one of the stalwarts in trying to push this through for a number of years when he was with Mango, and it's been implemented by two organizations, Humentum and CIPFA. Humentum, you probably all know about. It's a global nonprofit that convenes nonprofit professionals from around the world. It was a merger between Mango and Inside NGO and Lingos to form Humentum, and that was in 2017. And then you've got CIPFA, which is the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. It's focused really on local government and charities, but also plays an important role as an international convener on public sector accounting issues. Interestingly, both Humentum and CIPFA are themselves not-profit organizations. CIPFA is in fact a charity. It's one of my audit clients. And between them, the project partners are well connected to ranges of stakeholders. So we got sort of almost two sides of it. CIPFA's acting as a secretariat, delivering the technical resource, and Humentum is doing a lot of the engagement, etc. And seed funding to provide to support the project has been provided by the Open Society Foundation and the Ford Foundation. So we're really grateful to them for what they've done in this area of making sure we've got this support. So going on, there are two groups that are working on this. One is the Technical Advisory Group. It comprises national accounting standard setters, people like the Financial Reporting Council in the UK, FASB from the US, and from all around the world. You know, we've got standard setters from 5 continents. So they're pulling this together to bring the technical rigor and making sure it aligns with what they've got in their own geographies. And then to keep them on the straight and narrow from the practical side of saying, so you've got the theory and then they've got the practice. We have a practitioner advisory group. And the practitioner advisory group includes preparers, users, auditors, and academics who specialize in not-for-profit organizations. We've got a number of people from the practitioner advisory group on this call. Do you want to just wave your hands? I don't know if people can all see you. We got Phil. Phil, are you on? Yes, you are. Chris Harris. I can see Chris has just put himself up. Phil has. I'm not seeing any other images, but I thought Paul Winrow was also on. Yeah. So we've got some of our groups from all over the world, and we've run these sessions in different parts. So we ran this in India, and I've forgotten, Sam, how many did we have? We had over 100 people on that session, didn't we?
174 in India and 266 in Turkey.
Yeah. So, you know, you can see it's resonating. It's got a lot of interest from a lot of different people. So moving on to the how and the when. We've looked at the why and clarified what the project will prove and who the project partners are. But let's get at how and the when by looking at the phases and the timelines. So first of all, we've got this consultation paper. We've been working on this, and it's going to come out in a couple of months in January 2021. And that consultation paper will help shape quite a lot, which will effectively, hopefully, be an exposure draft, which we hope will really cover all the issues and won't require much change. because we're hoping that the consultation and the fact that we've got so much involvement with so many people, we're hoping that the exposure draft will get it right as far as possible. And that's going to come out by mid-2023. So it'll certainly be there available for when organizations like our SORP committee is looking at what it's going to be doing. But then the final guidance will come out little later, and it'll be ready for adoption in early 2025. And then different organizations in countries, etc., the equivalent of Charity Finance Group and the SORAP group in Kenya and other groups, the ICAI in India, etc., will be doing training and transition. Humentum will be actively involved in that whole training and transition piece, making sure people understand and do this together. So you've got SIPFA doing the technical rigor with us working with the groups, and then you've got the stakeholder engagement, which is happening alongside. So that really, they're these two aspects which will gel together through this process, and that's why it's going to take some time. Okay, so the project already has engagement from people all over the world. So what you're seeing there is the gold balloons are where we've got technical advisory group members. The red ones are where we've got members of the practitioner advisory group. And the black flags show where we've got various country champions working across the piece. And you can see there's quite good coverage right across the world. So I think I'm going to pause for a breath. And I'm not sure who I'm passing on to. Is Karen here? No, she's not, is she?
It's going to be me, Roberta. Right. So thank you very much, Pesh, for that run through. And it's as you've all seen, there's so much detail to go through, and it's a truly the scale that we're working on. We don't lack in ambition for what the project's aiming to achieve, but with all of your support and help, we'll get there. And it's interesting. It's like I was saying at the beginning. It's interesting that in the UK we're a bit spoilt. We're used to being asked to get involved. We're used to being consulted, and in some ways, sometimes there's a bit of there's this, there's so many things to get involved in. And so I think it's important to see the amount of engagement there is globally for this. And when we were preparing this meeting, we're saying, we had 200 people in India, and I was thinking, I wish we could get that many people in the UK. I always knew it was going to be a little bit difficult, again, given the context we're in, given that we have the UK SORP also going through a revision. But thank you for being here, because you're the pioneers. And we really do need, the project really does need that engagement, because without that engagement, we won't be able to shape it. So thank you. So now's the time for moving into our kind of breakout groups. This is, now that you've heard a little bit about the project, now's your chance to kind of meet each other and share questions and thoughts in smaller groups. We're going to be using breakout rooms. And you'll be automatically assigned to a breakout room, and you'll be automatically sent to your room and automatically brought back. So there's nothing to click or anything like that. Obviously, if you're able to have your videos and microphones on, you'll be able to interact in the chats and so on. If you've got any problems, come back to the main meeting, or perhaps use the chat to let us know, and we can sort that one out. So instructions now. So what do you have to do when you're in your group? So briefly introduce yourself, just really quickly, and then share reactions, comments, or questions that have come to mind from what you've heard so far. Is there anything that you would like clarification on? Is there anywhere where we need to go into more depth? So these are just some prompts for you to think about. So how might NPOs, regulators, auditors and donors in the UK benefit from IFR for NPO guidance? So this is bringing you back to right at the beginning. If you had joined us before we started, we had a thought experiment. So if you were thinking about that, imagine a world where there were standardized financial reporting. What would that look like to you? What challenges do you see for the UK's participation? We've already addressed some of them, and how might they be overcome? Challenges of kind of being over asked, and there's a lot going on. but how might they be overcome? Because it's really important that we do get good engagement. And then before we come back to the main room, if you could please nominate a spokesperson to share the highlights from your discussion to the wider group, and I'll be kind of managing that session at the end there. I'll be asking one person from each group just to kind of share 2 or 3 points and hopefully encourage a debate and discussion. So you'll be automatically brought back to the main meeting, so don't worry about clicking anything. Hi everyone, I think we're just waiting for everybody to come back in and then we'll start record. Oh good, Lucy has started recording again. So we're all back in the room. I hope you all had good, fruitful discussions. Oh, hi Jen. Jen is, I can see you all. I couldn't see you all before, so I apologise for kind of sounding a bit discombobulated earlier, but I couldn't see myself and I couldn't see anyone else, so it's odd.
Roberta, can I
yeah.
put in a special pledge for the spokesperson in our group, Sudhir, to go first because he has to drop off at 11.
Of course. So right, I'll stop waffling. So we're just going to pick somebody from every group. So Sudhir, please go.
Thank you, Roberta, and I'll be very swift. And apologies for jumping to the head of the queue. And yes, I think there's 1 or 2 observations from our breakout group. The first was a comment, which I think was mentioned in the introduction, which is about the interest in the linkage to the global standards on project grant reporting and some of the harmonisation with donor requirements and how important that is. And I think Tim was talking about the involvement he's had with that group and the work on internal controls and due diligence. So that was highlighted as a very important aspect. A link to that, I think, was the other issue about where you have branch offices needing to consider local reporting requirements and where that differs in terms of the group reporting, consolidated reporting requirements and the practicalities that creates is quite considerable. In lots of cases. I think some concern was expressed about what might emerge from this project and the implications for smaller entities, not making it too onerous for those, because clearly a lot of organisations involved in work internationally aren't necessarily the larger and better resourced organisations. We commented about it'd be helpful to understand, it was mentioned, I think, again in the introduction, a bit understanding really the scale of the problem, and a lot of people have anecdotal experience of where problems have occurred, and in our discussions we refer to things like inconsistency about income recognition, donated assets, those sorts of areas that seem to be habitual areas that come up. But just quantifying, I guess, the extent of difficulties would be useful to understand. And I just mentioned as an auditor some of the issues around auditing these days and the expectations on group auditors and the extent that as a group auditor you can't rely these days on what a component auditor has done. You have to examine much more closely these days under auditing standards, detailed working papers. You just can't take if you've got a great audit firm doing a branch audit, you can't just rely on that. You've got to be skeptical and adopt appropriate processes. So Roberta, those were, I hope I've summarised the key things in our initial conversations.
Thank you very much. Does anyone want to comment on that or remark on anything that Sudhir was saying there? You can either raise your hand or just, there's not that many of us here, so you can just speak out if you want to.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, it's Brian. Let's put my video on.
Hi, Brian.
Yes, one of the other things we discussed in our group was the donor conditions and requirements varying across so many donors, and that seems to be one of the biggest challenges. And it's comforting to hear that we have USAID who is one of the most onerous donors, maybe the European Commission can come on board as well, to get some sort of harmonization. And the end, Tim mentioned, the best way forward on that side of things is probably creating best practice, so they can buy into this best practice, and in the hope that maybe over the next 10 to 15 years, it becomes, you know, the norm and the standard, where we have harmonization across the donor conditions to a large extent. Just wanted to add that bit.
Maybe can I just add one comment there, that yeah, in a future ideal world, maybe we'd have one sort of standard that donor reporting formats could follow, and one sort of familiar standard for our statutory accounts. They'll never be the same totally as each other, but if they're not opposed and inconsistent with each other, then at least you've got some way of mapping and building an accounting system that can speak to both. And that would be our ultimate future dream. But yeah, the harmonization projects are in a sense waiting for this project to reach some decisions. And I think so it's a bit chicken and egg, which is another challenge. Yeah.
Thanks, Sam, and thanks, Brian. Shall we move on to the next group? Who would like to feedback from the next group? I think my group was group 1, and we had Chris, Alistair, and Katya with us. So I don't know who would like to feedback from ours. Should I just have to pick one of you?
For me to say a few words out. Okay, sorry, I just had to quickly nip to the door as usual. Packages arrive in the middle of things. You know, I mean, I think, you know, certainly agree with the comments that have been made previously, and all of us coming from different backgrounds, very supportive of the project, its aims, and you know, really buy into what we're trying to achieve here. You know, the benefits to the range of stakeholders is easy to explain, and I think, you know, there are steps to be taken to engage with some others, like international organisations, but that's part of the process. And once the consultation documents come out, you know, certainly engaging with them will be interesting. I think what was certainly encouraging from early on in the process, I mean, we picked Chris's brains on the history of where the group has got to date, was the involvement of standard setters globally and local jurisdictions, because without that, it's, you know, it's going to be very difficult. But having their involvement has been, you know, certainly gives that credibility that is needed, and that was very encouraging. And I think generally the benefits to everyone in terms of trying to narrow the language that is used globally, so that from a charities and INGOs point of view, in terms of when auditors or funders come and ask for information or explanations for accounting treatments, you know, it would be much easier to deal with that going forward, hopefully, rather than what it's like at the minute, where there's, you know, a myriad of different approaches, terminology, documentation, etc. So, and also from my point of view as an auditor, yes, you know, the more harmonization there is, the easier it will be for me. So I think, yes, generally, you know, we're all very supportive and look forward to hearing about the next steps.
Thanks, Alistair. Did Chris or Katya want to come in on that? Anything we didn't miss? The one thing that I kind of picked up on from our conversation was the point that Katya made around, in longer term, this is, you know, this is kind of blue sky thinking, and, you know, hopefully at one point it would be really helpful to have discussions with software providers around then the software that people use to submit their accounts, and so that there's one of the benefits could be less time spent on administration, essentially, and more time then spent on delivering the mission if there's harmonization, but especially around or as well around software. So I thought that was an interesting remark.
Can I speak to that for a second, Roberta? Because software companies have been emailing me. They all want to know what's going on and And we're thinking that much as we have a donor reference group now, that not quite yet, it's a bit too early to bring the software companies in yet, but when we've got an exposure draft, that we would create a sort of software, a developer reference group type equivalent to really bring them on board and get them ready to produce the software that will help the smaller non-profits around the world to apply this. It's not just training and, again, trying to make packages that aren't designed to fit. We can actually get packages that do a lot of the hard graft and are set up to do some of that work for you, and that would really be a game changer. So yeah, no, we're on the same page there, definitely.
Great, exciting. Does anyone want to? Yes, Philip.
So I was in a group with John, Douglas, Lizzie, and Sam, and we touched on some of the comments that's been made already. We started off with the benefit this will give organizations to give them more time to focus on what they should be doing. So that's sort of less duplication of effort internally. But I think also maybe an important selling point of this should be how it's going to improve interaction between implementers and the beneficiaries. So maybe the reports will be more accessible, or understandable from that point of view. We talked also the relationships that an NGO or maybe a grant giving NGO has. In the UK, it wasn't going to have such a huge impact perhaps, but when a UK NGO is working with another country, so it would help us have an understanding of the capabilities of that other NGO if they're able to follow this standard. Maybe it would help our discussions with banks as well. Maybe that would be something where they'll be happier to deal with an NGO that's using a standard that's recognized. Yeah, I think otherwise it was similar comments that have been made. Guys, anything I've missed or underplayed?
I think the link to CHS and the core humanitarian standards, which I think John has you even got them in the background of your video there. Do you want to say something about that, John? Because I think that's really relevant.
Exactly, that's where I'm coming from. As part of the CHS Alliance, which is a standard-setting body aiming to improve the effectiveness of aid and to put the beneficiaries, people affected by crisis, in the middle of it, I think that, I'm hearing a lot of the same language. I'm looking at a lot of the same processes. I'm looking at the similar kind of timescale. And I'm thinking there's got to be some synergy there. The CHS, the standard itself is due for revision in the coming months, and a process is being sketched out, which mirrors almost exactly the process that we've just been talking about this morning. So I think there's something going on there. There's some synergy. There's some opportunities for dialogue. It's not going to be the same thing. I mean, a grand unified theory of standards would be wonderful, but I think we're a few decades away from that. But certainly in the shorter term, in our lifetimes, maybe it would be possible to widen the dialogue. And to I can see Tim nodding vigorously there.
Yeah, no, just to say, John, very keen to do that, and I'm on the verification advisory panel of the CHS as well. So it's a great to link these things.
Excellent.
Maybe just to mention the other big sort of standards project that we're also integrating with or talking to and making sure we're joined up with is the Good Financial Grant Practice. If any of you've heard of that, that's the grant assessment due diligence standard. That's another one where we want to make sure we don't conflict with them, that we're joined up, that we ultimately, this small or medium NGO in a country that doesn't have its own standards is not burdened with compliance, but has a more unified and joined up set of things that they can comply with and put themselves on a global stage. And that's the sort of big picture. We want to make things easier, not harder.
Thanks, Sam and John. Karen.
Yeah, I'll say a few words on the final group. I think we got to the point where we were just saying who was going to be the speaker, and we zoomed out of the room. I'll say a few words, and Pesh or Rachel, who is still with us, might want to add to that. I felt like we had a slightly different conversation than the other groups, but hopefully that is good in terms of what came out of that. I think that one of the things that came out of that was about the importance of preparers being part of this process and being part of the consultation. But how do we kind of, the challenge being, how do we kind of engage those preparers and get the conversation going? But I think the thought was that this was a real opportunity to kind of input to that. So, you know, it's something that those on the group that I was in would like to do. I think that there was also this thinking about, well, we've had a SORP in the UK for some time, but this work that's being done on an international basis might provide some new ideas about how to think about some of the issues that non-profit organisations face. So some excitement about the opportunity that might come with that also came through in our conversation as well. But recognition that actually this is quite a challenging and ambitious project. So we're going to need to take people with us all the way along. And I think the only other point that came through that I wanted to raise, and Pesh and Rachel might want to add to, is kind of the importance of basing this on international standards, this project on international standards, and only kind of moving away from those where we need to do something specific for NPOs. So, you know, not trying to create something that is new and totally different, but actually kind of build on, you know, the standards that are already out there. Pesh, you turned your mic off. You must have something you want to add.
No, I think just to emphasize that point, that we don't, I can't see that there's really much point in sort of trying to reinvent the wheel. The sort of basic accounting principles are the same, and then it's how you apply them in our context, and that's what we really want to understand.
Thanks, Pesh. Thanks, Karen. Are there any remarks from anyone who perhaps hasn't spoken yet, or anything that we feel from our discussions that hasn't been picked up on? Chris?
Yeah, yes, a couple of things, I suppose. One is that, and I'm just not sure what the agenda is for our time this morning, but I guess you're going to tell us at some point about what, you know, what are we supposed to be doing? You know, what's our task here? How can we help? So I'm sure you'll come on to that.
Tim's up next. Yep.
Perfect. That's all right. I've done it the wrong way around. I should have said that second, and it'll be a perfect link. Just the first one. I want to stress, in a sense, how important it is for us to get the accountancy profession into the right place on this. The UK is accountancy central. Pretty much most of the international accounting bodies are based here, and obviously the US is too, but you know, a lot of them are UK based. A lot of the standard set of people are based here in the UK too. So although it doesn't necessarily, we don't see that, the reality is that is the case. So I think we do have the chance to influence that group. They have put up some money. They helped us with the research that kind of kicked all this off, which is great. But it'd be lovely to keep their attention or remind them, if you like, of their responsibility, not just to us here, but frankly, as part of the global profession. And I think that is something that is going to be helpful for us to be able to do, and perhaps will be in the work programme, I don't know, going forward. But I think, you know, we're all accountants of one flavour or another, and it's our profession that's got a role to play here. And I think it's important for us to remember that too.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, important point. And we talked in our group about one of the challenges being potentially, you know, funding to keep going. And where that needs to come from, and where the interest is to develop it. So I think, shall we move on now to Tim's presentation, because our time is rolling on. So thank you very much for those reflections and that engagement. I think there's we've all identified a number of benefits. But I think we all agree this is what we want to happen. It's the ideal. And the fact that we're here talking about it and actually getting it started is testament to all of us here. And yes, please do. You know, this is the first meeting. This is the introduction. Tim's now going to take us through the consultation draft and the, what there is to engage with next. We need your help to engage further around this. So that's very welcome. I'll just hand over to Tim now, if that's okay. I think Tim's going to share his screen again.
Great, thanks, Roberta. And just while we're here, I wanted to welcome Karen to the meeting and to introduce her, because she is the primary author of the 200+ page consultation paper. I mean, she has a team of people working with her on the writing, and she's had to deal with more than 2,000 comments from the TAG and the PAG, and to try and reflect those. So not only is it an immense challenge to write it in the first place, but to actually incorporate all of the views and make it a genuinely shared document. And she's done a tremendous job. So I just wanted to acknowledge her and thank her for that. Good, so I'll share my screen, and please tell me that it's displaying correctly. Is that right? Can you see that full screen? Great.
Yep, we can see it.
So yeah, the consultation process is going to be launched in January 2021. So quite soon, just after Christmas, just after you're refreshed. So who should participate and why, and what does it look like? And how practically are you going to actually respond? So the who, obviously everybody that's here, you're invited to participate. And we're particularly interested to hear the views of regulators, of auditors, of funders, and very importantly, the MPOs, because the preparers are the people that have to grapple with this probably at the highest level of detail. And, I think we've already talked about how it could be tempting because we as the UK, we've already had the SORP, and therefore, kind of the job's done for us. And when we did the original research back in 2015, the level of response was higher outside of the UK, and the level of support was higher outside of the UK. So, I really want to urge you not to think that we can sit this one out, though, because we need to make sure that, one, that our needs are reflected, because increasingly, I think the guidance that we create, if it gathers momentum as we plan, it will start to inform the SORP going forward. So you want to be able to influence it at the ground floor. And secondly, I think as kind of Chris has intimated, this is actually a place where the UK has got a lot of expertise. We've done a lot of learning over the years about how to try and use accountancy for the non-profit sector. It's, accountancy was developed to deal with for-profit entities, and it's not a straightforward thing just to say, oh, we can just apply that. So let's share our expertise through this process with the world, and also influence the standard setters here. So let's get into the real detail now. It's shaped by this consultation paper, as I say, about 200 pages. So it's important to know how it's structured so you can navigate through it and use your time effectively. So after the executive summary, the introduction sets out the objectives of the project and explains who should respond and how. And it's really essential that you read that bit. The bulk of the paper and all the questions that we're looking for your feedback on are in two main sections. So there's a part 1 and there's a part 2. And we'll look at these in a bit more depth. So part 1 looks at the landscape overview level, while part 2 takes a much closer look at a number of specific accounting and reporting issues. And then there's a supplementary information which gives more context about the project, and then a glossary. And that's important because a lot of these terms, they may have different meanings in different jurisdictions. We can't hope to standardize that now, but we need to make it clear how we're using terms in the consultation paper, and the people understand the terms in that way. So what I'm going to do is go a bit more deeper into part 1 and part 2. So now we want to look at really what are the kinds of questions and feedback that you're going to be asked for. So part 1 of the consultation paper is about framework level issues, like how to describe non-profit organizations and who their stakeholders are. And it's written in plain English so that everybody can engage with this. Very broad audience we need of all stakeholders, and it's not even limited to accountants. So really encourage as many people in your network to engage at this level. And what each chapter does is presents a proposal and then ends with a request, which is for general matters for comment. In other words, you're invited to comment on the general level matters presented in the chapter. And they take this form of, do you agree? And if not, why not? In that sense, the question's open but structured. But obviously you need to read the chapter in order to submit a comment on it. You can't just kind of go straight to the questions and start answering. And part 2 is about specific accounting issues, like when to recognize grant income, which has come up quite a lot already in the earlier discussion, or whether to disclose gifts in kind. And that's written again in plain English, but it's more likely to be pitched to a technical audience, accountants, and it does require a kind of basic familiarity with accounting concepts and language. Now, each section describes the issue, then presents alternative treatments, and then ends with the specific matters for comment. So, and here now the questions take the form of, do you agree with the description and the alternatives presented? If not, why not? And which alternative do you prefer and why? So as you can imagine, within the technical advisory group and the practitioner advisory group, a lot of work has been on trying to get these alternatives right, because the feedback that we get on the alternatives will really drive the consensus we need for the exposure draft. And I think, as Pesh has described, we're trying to take the best of the best approach here. We've got people on the technical advisory group from national standard setters across the world, and some of the best ideas are not from the UK, as kind of Chris was saying, that other people have solved these problems differently elsewhere, and we need to be open-minded. And through doing this kind of consultation, I think the world can come to kind of choose what are the best alternatives for us to do not-for-profit accounting. So just to dig again a little bit further deeper. So in part 1, chapter 1, it's all about which organizations should be considered non-profit organizations. And that's not as straightforward a question as you might first think. So what we want to do is to have a broad range of non-profits beyond charities, such as religious organizations, non-profit hospitals, universities. And what we've done is come up with a characteristics-based approach. So what are the general characteristics of these kind of organizations? We describe them, and then we're asking for feedback about those. Do you agree with them? And if not, why not? Part 2 is about the stakeholders, the users of our reports, and what their information needs are. And again, it presents a proposal and says, do you agree with those information needs that those different stakeholders have? If not, why not? And then part 3 is, it's all about the guidance itself. And again, it presents some proposals. And one of the most important ones is that the guidance should be accrual based for reasons set out in that chapter. But and again, we've had quite a lot of discussion around this, because many donors, for example, currently require cash-based reporting. And it's one of these big areas of kind of conflict between donor requirements and good practice. So, really encourage you to look at that bit, and there's and to think through this. And then the other big area of debate is, are small organizations able to do accruals based accounting, or and what we're trying to develop a theory of is that there isn't a sort of binary, you do cash, you do accounting. There's actually a journey that you can use accrual-based concepts increasingly with your complexity, size, and the nature of your work. So part 1, chapter 4 now, it's all about the existing financial reporting frameworks. So firstly, it's really important to say, well, it needs to be based on existing international frameworks like IFRS or IFRS for SMEs or IPSAS. And then it sets out the criteria for evaluating the usefulness of those frameworks and assesses them against those criteria. So we're judging the international frameworks, which is quite a lofty position. Now, again, there are 3 questions. And what we need to know is, do you agree with these criteria that we've used to evaluate it? Because it's very important decision to say which international framework do we base the non-profit guidance on. And then chapter 5 is about a proposed model for developing the guidance. And at the moment, what we're kind of, having already said before, we asked which framework. We're working on the kind of hypothesis or the idea that IFRS for SMEs should be the foundational framework. So we're going to check with everybody whether they agree with that. On the basis that it is, then the aim would be essentially to produce a booklet that accompanies the IFRS for SMEs. And at this point as well, we're not trying to meet the needs of the tiny community-based organizations that would basically only use cash accounting as their way of working. So again, we need to really check that out with the community, that is the right way forward. So there are questions around that. So it's a reasonably whistle-stop short tour, and I think it's because it's recorded. Hopefully when it actually comes to the consultation paper, you can have another look at this. But actually, we'll be producing other tools and guides to help you navigate the consultation paper. And what I'm hoping it's leaving you with a feeling is, this is actually pretty interesting. And I've got views that I want to feed into the consultation. And because that's really the point, we need to hear your views and your responses to these proposals. So what you are going to do when you get there is, you'll find it's a very structured read, and it's going to lead you to answer these kind of structured questions. So it should be, you'll need to kind of put yourself in a darkened room for a considerable period of time, but it should be a process you can kind of work through and do in quite an effective way. So we've looked at part 1, and that's the landscape level, right? About who's it for, what frameworks do we use, all those sorts of things. I'll just give you a flavor now of part 2, which is the deeper dive into the really thorny issues that we're trying to solve here. And these have all been discussed by our 2 groups. And the types of specific issues that are discussed are shown above. So how should they be presented? What should be included within the narrative reports? And it's being come out very clearly that we think narrative reports should be part of the guidance, because as non-profits, that's where a lot of actually the meaningful information is. The numbers don't tell the whole story. They need narrative to bring that story out. But what should be in it? Also, things like income recognition, again, which we've come up. Should fundraising costs be separately identified? And if so, how? That's been a very thorny question in the UK, SORP, I know. And when is the right time to recognize a grant made to another organization? Again, this is a major cause of confusion, because it's done in different ways in different places. And then there are a few more complex issues, which I'm not going to go into all of them now. So in the UK, yes, the SORP provides guidance, but most of the countries that certainly we as Umentum work with around the world, they don't have anything like SORP at all. And they have to basically make up the answers to these questions on a case-by-case basis. And that's why you've got so much diversity and lack of consistency. And it's also why donors tend to be so specific and have such a rules-based approach, is because the lack of guidance internationally means that if you're a donor and you want to receive things in the same format, you have to be very, very prescriptive. So as I said before, we will, especially when it comes to these detailed technical issues, create some accompanying materials like videos and whole webinars that go deep into each topic, like income recognition, fundraising, etc. And those will be globally available webinars. So you'll be able to get involved if you want to really dig deep into a particular issue. So I think I am going to hand to Karen now as our country champion, if she's here. I think, yes.
I am. Thanks, Tim. Apologies for joining you late and for almost claiming the accolades of other Karen as I went, oh no, that's not me. I was in the SORT meeting, interestingly. So I think that it's really important to recognise the linkage between the two and why CFG is so pleased to be in this role, because not only are we a convener for one of the engagement strands for the development of the next SORP and a participant in another of the engagement strands, I also sit on the SORP committee. So as well as sit for being the body that represents and supports that SORP making body activity, there is a real clear need for that sort of connectivity between those two processes. So very, very much behind this and have been trying to seek a solution to this problem that has been kicking around for, well, decades, but we've certainly been trying to get it going. So applaud Humentum and CIPFA for getting this going. So in terms of the next stages, Tim's just set out for you the detailed consultation and items that are there, and that paper is going to be launched in January, 28th of January 2021, as you can see on the screen. We'd like you to get involved as much as possible, but not just you, and Tim's also said this, it shouldn't just be the accountants here. I think we need to ensure that this is beyond just the accounting profession. The detailed information will be shared at that point. We will be looking for feedback on part 1 by the 30th of July, and on part 2 by the 24th of September, I think. Is that right? Yes, 24th of September. It's obscured on the thing. So what we would really like you to do is get involved with that part 1 at the very least, and give us that information. And that's fine if that's where it stops. If you don't want to go any further, that's absolutely fine. And equally, in part 2, as Tim's just set out, there will be a whole load of different technical issues. And if you have an opinion on one bit, but not an opinion on the other, that's also equally useful to us. We don't want you to feel that if you can't respond to the whole of this, that you can't respond at all. Whatever you can give is absolutely essential to the process. The main process of delivery will be through the project website, the detail of which is on the screen there. And then once we've done that, we've got a virtual series of virtual roundtables that will be being undertaken between March and May next year. They are going to be virtual, even if we are back into normality. And I think that gives us the ability to stretch beyond those people who may be UK-based, but living internationally, or for those that have a much broader geographic spread across the UK as well. So really, really keen to advocate people to get involved and to get that word out there, because as Tim says, if you don't get involved with this, at some point, this will form the bedrock of an international standard. That international standard will form the bedrock of the SORP, and it will come back into our daily lives, whether we like it or not. So I'd much rather that we were in there describing and shaping the story, not just responding to it. And I'll stop there.
So I think, shall I carry on from here, Tim? So
yeah, that's fine. Now, just before you do that, I did want to thank Karen. As she said, she was very much like at the very beginning of this process, the spotting this and kind of really putting CFG's weight behind it, organizing that symposium, which led really to the commitment to conduct the research. So, CFG really have been a primary motivator of this work. So Roberta, yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Tim. And you've got too many Karens completely involved in this. At least one's with a K and one's with a C. So we've got one way of differentiating. So yes, so the one takeaway from this meeting, because I had a few people saying how do we engage, is please engage with the consultation. Spread it to your networks. As Karen and Tim and others have said, it's not just about us here in the room, but it's your networks. It's what you can do to convene as well around this. And we spoke as well in my breakout group about how to involve some of the large INGOs themselves, whether they're registered in the UK or registered elsewhere. That's going to be, I think, the next stage in January is where we're really going to need to be reaching out to them. So whatever you can do to help us as CFG, as country champions, reach out to them as well would be greatly appreciated. So we've got a little bit of time. Are there any questions? Sam, yes.
Can I just mention, it's not a question, but just to say we are currently putting together a kind of promoters pack so that anybody who would like to be able to share in their networks will have the language, the images, to make it easier, a lighter lift. We'll obviously share that with Roberta and CFG, but that's something we're looking to be downloadable from the website. So anybody who wants to put their weight behind it in their networks, we can make that a lighter lift.
Thanks, Sam. So you've heard a bit from Tim about the consultation process. Are there any immediate questions right now about that process that you'd like to share? And I would normally say put them in the chat, but I think we can just put hands up and express them. Perhaps not yet. Perhaps you need time to take it away and digest it, which is totally fine. And you can get in touch with me, and I can forward on to Tim and Sam. But I think on the next slide you might even see where you can engage directly. So on the IFR for NPO website, there is a forum, and the way to engage with that is just to go onto the website, and you can see at the top there that there's a tab for forum. Please do engage there. You can ask questions, speak to people across the globe that are interested and involved in this project. So we can truly get that connectivity, not just in the UK with the UK SORP, but broadly across the globe, really. So please do get involved there. You can also, as I said, questions about the consultation process, you can come direct to us, to Sam, to Tim, to me. We're more than happy to answer kind of any questions you may have about the process and what happens next. And yeah, so what are the next steps? What do we commit to do next? So essentially what your takeaways are, you can wait for the consultation to come out, or what we'd like you to do as well is subscribe to the newsletter. And you can do that by visiting the website. When you see our social posts on LinkedIn and Twitter, please do share them, engage with them there, and comments and so on. And as we've all said, please tell your grantees, your auditor partners, your country offices, your charities that you work with about the project, and help us to spread awareness and help us to get that engagement. And I think with that, that's the kind of end of the slideshow, the formal slideshow. But we do have a little bit of time if anybody wants to ask any questions now or make any remarks or any comments. But I'd just like to say thank you very much for everyone for coming along. Really value your time. I know that there's a lot going on. Really appreciate the time that you're giving, and that you will give. I'm going to commit you to giving time in future as well. So thank you. Pesh, I think, wanted to say something. Oh, you're on mute, Pesh. No.
No, I thought we were waving goodbye. That's what I was doing.
Oh, okay. Well, we can wave goodbye. Are we ready to wave goodbye? Sam, do you have any closing remarks as the project director that you wanted to? Have I covered everything?
Are you going to do the cameras on photo?
Yeah, should we just do a photo? That would be quite nice. If you can turn your cameras on briefly, and I'll just do a quick screenshot. Look, it'd be really nice. Great. So I'll just do 1, 2, 3, then we smile. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Yay.
And just to say thank you to CFG. Thank you so much, Roberta, for being our country champions in the UK. And really appreciate it. And the work of all the PAG members. And this project, in terms of actual staff, is minuscule. And we're absolutely dependent on professional advisors and volunteers and champions around the world. So thank you so much for helping us make this impossible dream become a reality.
Thank you. Okay, well, Friday the 13th, it's not over yet, but we got through this one without any major problems. So that bodes well. So thanks again for coming. And I think we can wave now. They were allowed to wave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
you.
Bye.